So Nick McKenzie and Nick Weaver from Deep Sea Arcade, welcome to Australian Musician.
Thank you
for having us.
We're here to talk about the new album Blacklight, which
Yeah.
is coming out. But before we do that, I'm just wondering, growing up and through your teens, what acts were you into, and were you into similar things?
We were very into similar things, and we listened to them together.
Yeah, we were friends when we were really, really young, and then Nick moved overseas for like 5 years, and I remember him coming back from England with like Oasis and what else?
Manic Street Preachers,
Yeah.
and Stone
Really cool
Roses,
stuff.
and Charlatans.
But we were both very into lots of obvious things separately as well. Like,
We got really into the Sneaker Pimps together, and Cypress Hill, a lot of kind of like House of Pain. We were listening to all of that stuff as well, which sort of, I think, rather than the first record, which obviously is more of a rock record, we went back to those influences with Blacklight and sort of got more into programming grooves and creating, taking on those influences from trip hop that we listened to. Got really into Portishead together for a while.
yeah.
So I think that a few of those influences came out on this record.
Yeah. Outlands coming out in 2012.
That's right.
You set up shop in London for a little while in
Yeah.
2013 to work on the second album. 5 years down the track, it's coming out. What has life thrown up to you in the last 5 years?
Yeah. Well, I personally got very interested in... it was funny, we signed with Chug Entertainment for management, and working with those guys, I got really interested in promoting and you know, actually not just doing my own shows, but booking other people's shows and starting and trying to, I guess, put shows on for upcoming bands in Sydney that I loved, because when we were in London, I saw so much of that. There was like a real culture in London of bands actually having their own club nights and, you know, putting on their own, like their friends' bands and stuff. And I saw that it was just a real, like, it was super inspiring to see bands like The Horrors, for example, like have their own club night and then put on bands like Temples, and then this kind of domino effect of bands influencing each other, etc., etc. And so I just got super interested in that, and just got into the world of promoting. And then Nick and I were always working on music sort of in the background to that as well, and working with a guy called Eric J. Dabowski. And so that process, I guess, took a little bit longer, but we got there in the end.
Yeah. So what kind of things did you learn from creating Outlands that maybe you took into this one?
I think maybe, I mean, we've talked, like, there was kind of a very deliberate intent to, like, have it slightly more electronic, I suppose. Like, we wanted to explore a different area. It's more about, I think we learnt a lot about how to work in the studio and stuff like that doing Outlands, but just in terms of the actual direction, I think we kind of realised what we'd sort of used up and where to go from there, kind of thing, I suppose. Yeah,
we sort of learned a few production chops on Outlands, like the concept of sound replacing and doing things with the computer that modern recording has, I suppose, like, because we were super influenced by bands like the Kinks and the Beatles, obviously, on that first record, but then we sort of wanted to bring it into a modern arena by using sound replacement, which is like the process of you know, replacing the snare sound with like a more electronic snare sound or the kick sound, and using like ways of bringing electronic recording into a kind of like old school garage setting. But from learning those skills, we then applied those more to creating a more electronic palette for the second album, Blacklight, with the help of Eric J. Dabowski, who showed us a lot of stuff. Like he showed us he had worked with Flume, and although this record doesn't really obviously sound like Flume or
Cypress Hill.
Chet Baker or Cypress Hill or the Chemical Brothers. I mean, it might take influences from those places, but he really helped to shape that palette and use programs like Synplant and Omnisphere, things that we just didn't know about on that first record.
So, starting the album in 2013, how different is the album to what you thought it'd be back then?
There are some songs that are sort of the same, and then, I mean, if we had managed to release an album in 2014, it'd probably be quite different, and that may not have been a good thing. I'm glad it got to where it is, because there were a lot of songs that were written in the last year or so.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, like, I feel as though we knew that we wanted to go down a path of sort of using like a lot of synth-based stuff and a lot of drum groove stuff. But we sort of also got very interested in soul and disco records and bands like the Isley Brothers and Guitar Tones and stuff like that we brought into those kind of like program drum grooves, etc. So,
and I think like deciding that you want to do something like that, or like, you know, having certain influences that you're really into and be like, I want things to sound like this. It's one thing to say that, but I think in a way you kind of have to like learn how to use those ideas as well, and that takes time, you know.
Yeah, it does. It's like learning a new instrument, I suppose.
The drums and the bass seem to cut through the mix more than the first album. Like,
yeah,
it sounds
he's
like
so good at that. He's
that-
really talented.
that was the plan all the way along.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's definitely just part of the style of production and mixing that was Eric's influence, I think. Just having things sound really sort of big and in your face, and I love the sound of the old record, but yeah, I think that's a big part of like the kind of that 60s influence that's so obvious in the first record. And I think that's the big difference, is that hi-fi thing.
Yeah, and obviously you speak about the drums and the bass. Obviously the bass was played by Nick, but the drums were played by Matt Johnson from not for the whole record, but for a few of the tracks on the record. And Matt Johnson is the drummer from
Jeff Buckley's band, as well as St. Vincent and everything like that. We were just really lucky. It kind of was a nice coincidence that he was in town and he wanted to record songs, and it was a really lovely experience. And the rest of the record was played by Nick Meredith, who's another good friend of ours who's done stuff with us live before as well. And and he played. I mean, we were really lucky to be surrounded by good drummers, and I think that's part of what lets us push the drums out really far as well in the mix.
Why is the album called Blacklight?
I suppose we wanted to go with. I had a book of posters from the late 70s, early 80s that were blacklight posters, and I loved the way that, you know, you can have this sort of dark palette. Like for an image, a blacklight poster is completely black, but with these sort of like bright colors, and I felt that was the most appropriate way. Like I felt that the album sort of sounded like a blacklight poster. It's sort of it's dark, but it's also got these really bright moments, and it felt like the best way to visually, portray what we were trying to do with the sound, I guess.
There's something a little bit blacklight about your Nicki Minaj t-shirt, actually.
We can.
It's getting there.
It's getting there, yeah.
10 tracks on the album. Did you have many others that you were playing around with?
So many others.
Yeah.
So many. And I feel as though those 10 tracks made the cut because they just felt like they felt like the most interesting journey and the best of that batch of songs, I think. But we did so many. Yeah, there were so many songs, so many, and but yeah, in terms of like actually creating that mood, those 10 felt like they did it succinctly, and there was no sort of like stuff that was thrown in there because it was there. There was no reason to put the other, you know, ideas in that same place as a body of work, I think. Yeah.
Is there a track that's closer to your heart or that you're more proud of than others?
What about you?
I mean, the first single that we put out, Outlaw, I really love that one. Just a very kind of slow, dreamy thing and it was just, sometimes songs just kind of come together in a really nice way. Some of that song's really old, and then some of we came up with not too long ago, and I don't know, I have a good feeling about it. What other ones are you
I
into?
love Oh Julia. I think
yeah,
that's a great song, and I really like Ready as well. And I've had lots of moments with those two songs, but they capture a mood and a feeling for the record. When I like it, and the record's grown on me in ways as well. Like there's some songs that I was more excited about now, and other songs that I was less sure about, and now I'm way more confident about those songs, which is funny when, and obviously the process of playing live and seeing what people respond to shapes that as well. It's funny how playing a record live can really shape your perception of it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the gear that you used. On stage, you use a Nord stage. Were many of the sounds coming from the album, or were they soft synths?
They so we use a collection of a collection of soft synths. We use Synplant, we use Omnisphere, we use the Juno 60. We use a whole bunch of a bunch of the new Roland did the mini boutique synths that have come out in the last 3 or 4 years, but Brendan and I ran to the shop and bought them, and they are on the record. In terms of guitars,
Well, but live with those synths as well. I mean, so a lot of the Nord stage, I think, is occasionally used for piano sounds and thing, but a lot of it's basically just triggering MIDI stuff. As much of those plugins as the computer can handle in a live situation. I think a lot of it's sampled for the keyboard.
There's a lot of samples. So we use a lot of stuff from, we use a lot of the Spitfire plugins, because I did quite a lot of work in film production as well. So the Omnisphere and Spitfire are staples of the film production world. But then Synplant's a really nice, weird synth that I recommend to anybody. It's kind of got a beautiful interface as well. That's this kind of plant, stems and stuff. It doesn't have, it's super weird. You should definitely check it out.
Yeah. And the guitars and bass?
So I use a P bass. In a perfect world, I'd like to use a P bass every time I'm playing with my fingers, and then a Hofner when I'm playing with a pick. But I can't walk around with two basses all the time. And there's a lot of Telecaster, basically, most of the guitars, and that goes back to the first album as well.
Yeah, Nick's got this thin line telly that's a beautiful guitar.
Yeah, it's a good one. And Mason, who plays guitar for us live, has a Telecaster as well.
So when you play these songs live, is it going to be a tricky album to reproduce?
No,
we've been doing it, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, there's a lot. We didn't have a keyboard for the first album, so that's the huge difference. But you're able to do a lot with that.
Yeah. So there's so much you can do now. Combining, obviously, at the end of the day, you're bringing a lot of samples of soft synth and analog gear into one place, and you can do that. You can do that now more than you could ever do it in the past.
So what will the setup of the band be? How many members?
5.
There's 5, yeah. So we've gone from 2 guitars to just 1 guitar and a keyboard. Brendan, who's playing keyboards, has a lot of juggling and responsibility to do.
Which is really amazing, and he manages to do it all.
Yeah.
So is there any room for the songs to expand and extend on stage?
Absolutely. Yeah. So rather than using sort of stuff to track, we would rather sample instruments and then have them played live, then be triggering track, and so there is the space for like us to jam out on sections and stuff like that, or in a moment like where we might want to, like, we're feeling like we might take the middle eight to go around twice or whatever, or the intro to go around twice. We can do that. We have
Or the
freedom.
guitarist breaks a string and you need to keep
Yeah,
playing
we
for
can
an
do
extra
all of that
5 minutes.
stuff. Yeah, which has happened.
And are there any particular tracks which are shaping up pretty nicely on stage for you?
Yeah, well, Oh Julia, like Nick was
Yeah.
talking about before, is like really fun one to play. It's kind of the funkiest one on the album.
I suppose it is.
But yeah, it's just a really groovy number. No one in the audience has heard it yet, but they always seem to like it anyway, which is a nice sign.
And,
Yeah.
And mixing some of the old tracks in there too.
Yeah.
It all flows nicely.
Yeah, it does. So yeah, it feels good. And on the tour we just did, Nick sort of actually put together the set list because I was working on some other stuff. And you did a really good job.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah.
I think it's cool as well because the new songs are like less garagey, but then when you get a live band, they're going to have, live drums is going to have a little bit of that, I mean, not trashiness, but it's going to have the slight more of that element. So that brings potential for the old songs to come in really nicely and be, a fairly coherent part of the set, I reckon.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us when the album's out
The album is out on October 26th.
and what happens after that and into 2019.
Well, we've got a national tour here. I think we will be touring in South America soon, and then we've got a bunch of other shows that we'll be doing. I think we'll be doing some international touring, but we're sort of sorting that out right now with our booking agent and stuff. So yeah, but we'll definitely be touring in January nationally in Australia. Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for chatting to us.
Pleasure.
Thanks for having us.